Today on Teach Me How to Vegan.
Is it right to force your beliefs on your kids? Are you depriving your kids? What if your kids don't want to be vegan? Do they have a choice? What about their health? Are you sure your kids are going to be healthy? And then along the lines of health, we get this question a lot. Where does your kid get their protein, calcium?
Fill in the blank.
Fill in the blank. And then, the classic, don't kids need milk for strong bones? All right. And then lastly, just a little bit about, because sometimes I hear this, is my kid's doctor said XYZ. Welcome to Teach Me How to Vegan,
A podcast where we explore how to switch to a vegan diet.
I'm Tony, a health educator, fitness instructor, and plant-based eating program manager for Animal Protection of New Mexico.
I'm Mickey, a stay-at-home homeschooling mom and vegan cook who likes to play in the kitchen.
Our family stopped eating meat in 2007.
And we went vegan in 2016. Now we like to share with others what we've learned.
Thanks for joining us.
Let's get started.
Welcome, everyone. Today, we're talking more about how to answer those common questions, but this is the parenting edition. So it's all the questions we get about raising vegan kids.
Okay.
Right?
And it will probably not be an exhaustive list.
No.
But these are common questions.
Common questions.
Yeah.
Usually they come from other parents, sometimes not.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's really tough when you get questions from people who are not parents, who've never raised children. Yep. Questioning your parenting, that's the extra.
Take a breath moment
Yeah.
a little bit. And some of these, it really just depends on what mood you're catching me in. Because sometimes I want to be super snarky and have an attitude, and other times I can be much more diplomatic.
Right. And we're going for the diplomatic approach
Yes.
here. We're going for the respectful, courteous response to the question that you...
Most of the time I am diplomatic because some people are genuinely asking to want information.
Right.
Not asking to debate.
It's when they're asking to debate or to sound judgy or to be passive aggressive. That's when you want to get snarky, but work really hard not to. But when people are asking for a genuine information or they're genuinely confused or whatever.
Or like, oh, I hadn't thought of that.
I'm happy to have a conversation. So it all depends on the context.
Yes.
But at any rate, here we go with some common questions we get asked about parenting vegan children. Mm-hmm. So let's just start off. Let's just go into it.
Dive right in.
Heavily.
Okay, here we go.
So because this is one of the most common ones that I've gotten. Some version of, is it right to force your beliefs on your kids?
Well, I mean, what is parenting?
And that's what it's always like. That's literally the definition of parenting, is it not?
I mean, most people don't think of quote unquote forcing their kids to live a certain way, but really we have nicer words like tradition or this is how we do things. Mm-hmm. This is how it works in my house. Mm-hmm. Or, there's versions of that just are almost nicer versions of the quote unquote forcing, because let's be real. You and I never had an option to not eat meat or dairy or certain foods. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And outside of, economic status, socioeconomic status, where you have to eat what's there because otherwise there's literally nothing else to eat. Outside of that, you really didn't have a choice. Mm-hmm. And you had to clean your plate. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you're forcing your children to overeat because you don't trust them to know they're full.
Yep.
So there are many ways in which this shows up, quote unquote, forcing shows up in parenting. We just have nicer words for it.
Yes, absolutely. I had no choice about whether or not to be baptized.
Right.
I had no choice about whether or not I was going to go to Sunday school or what we call catechism. I had no choice. I'm not saying that I didn't want any of those things. I'm just saying that was not an option.
It wasn't an option.
It was, this is what we do.
Exactly.
So, but nobody questioned my parents, is it right for you to force your beliefs on your kids in terms of religion?
Right.
Nobody questions that.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So,
I mean, my dad did to my mom. So that's why I wasn't raised
Well,
Catholic.
not nobody.
But most
people don't question
But there were
that.
many other things that they didn't question, that they just did because that's the way it had always been done.
Right.
Right.
And that's my point is like a lot of these things we're going to talk about. It's like when you apply it to any other lifestyle choice or decision or philosophy or way of life,
nobody questions it. Quote
people,
unquote, nobody
like,
questions
generally
it.
speaking, nobody questions it.
Yep.
Nobody bats an eye. But when it comes to veganism, all of a sudden it's put in question. Right?
Yes. Yeah.
So,
exactly.
Yeah, that was a good breakdown of that question. So a nice way to answer it would be something like this. Many common practices in parenting could be considered forcing our beliefs on our kids, such as parents who baptize their children.
Mm-hmm.
When our children come of age, they will be free to make their own decisions.
That's great. And it's very much like, look, when they're older, they're going to make their own choices, and every parent chooses a lifestyle, screen time or no screen time, video games or no video games, activities outside the home or no activities outside the home. Like, parents set the tone and choose the lifestyle for their families. Ours is no different. And when our kids are older, just like your kids, they will evaluate what they grew up with and keep what they want to keep.
Exactly. And this is going into the next question that I was going to bring up, which is a lot of people will ask, are you depriving your kids?
Of what?
Well, that's what people say.
I want to say of what? Heart disease, but hello, Snark. I'm sorry.
Dial it back.
I know.
Yeah, because a lot of people, and I've had this question asked by people that I love and adore, and they feel like a lot of their joy and happiness in life comes from eating fat, juicy steaks. And so I'm depriving my kids of the experience of eating fat, juicy steaks, which is a large portion of where their happiness comes from. Right?
Right.
So that's where like this question comes from, I think, a lot of times anyway. And it might not be fat, juicy steaks, but that's a lot of actually what people say, that or bacon.
Yes.
Like that's what people go to all the time.
Yeah.
And it's just like, okay, so.
How did you answer that?
Well, depending on the person, I might have said, of what? All the health conditions that I have as a result of my childhood diet.
Ooh.
No shade or hate to my parents. And, I've talked to my mom about this a lot. It's like you made the best decisions and choices you had with the information you had in the 80s.
Yes.
And
exactly.
This is when doctors were telling parents outrageous things still, more so in like the 70s.
Yeah.
You heard in 60s and the further you go back, the more outrageous the medical advice was.
Yeah.
But in the 80s, it was still pretty, today it's still kind of outrageous, but
yeah.
That's another story. But, I tell them like you made the best decision you could. And I grew up with obesity and asthma and GERD and all of these things.
You had,
so I'm actually working on, depriving my children of that same experience, to be quite honest. So that's one way, you could go about it, but really it's some version of what you were just talking about. Like actually we all make decisions to limit different experiences for our children. It shows up everywhere. So just a few examples of areas where most parents set limits include screen time, video games, bedtimes, and junk food.
Yeah.
This is simply one of the areas that we're setting limits based on our education and experiences.
I love that because it brings it back to, like you said, like it doesn't sound outrageous to limit your kid's screen time.
Right.
In fact, it's recommended.
Right.
Okay. But when you talk about veganism or being plant-based, all of a sudden it sounds outrageous.
Right.
So it's, this is how we're choosing our lifestyle.
Right. So that's how I frame it. It's like parents set limits all the time. This is merely one limit we're setting.
Yeah.
And, like I'll throw in there based on our education and experiences.
Yes.
Or based on the information we have and our experiences that we've had.
Yes.
Like, it's not like this thing, like I'm trying to be better than anybody else.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be better than I was. All parents, so many parents that I know say they just want a better life for their children than they have. Like, that's all we're all going for.
Yeah.
And so how that plays out and how it looks
It's different.
is different for a lot of people.
Yes.
But this is our version of that.
Yes, it's one of our versions of that.
Right?
Absolutely.
This is one of the ways that it plays out. Is like we're trying to have our kids have different experiences around food, nutrition, and health and wellness.
Yes.
All right. So here's another question that is along the same lines. What if your kids don't want to be vegan? Do they have a choice?
What if your kids don't want to eat meat? Do they have a choice?
Again, you can always throw it back at people.
Because a lot of families don't.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? They think something's wrong with their kid if they don't like meat.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes it takes the child we've heard stories of kids. Oh, yeah, they don't like meat. They haven't liked meat since they were 2. And we used to try to force her and this and that, and then we just gave up. We gave up on forcing this and that.
You hear it all the time.
Do you know what I mean? And it's like, well, she naturally doesn't want that. So, then they can come back and be like, well, what if your kid naturally wants meat? Well, when they're old enough and on their own, they can make that choice.
Well, another thing is my kid naturally wants Skittles and marshmallows like every single day. Should I just allow that?
Right. Yeah. That's a good one.
So there's always that argument like, well, whatever you're craving, your body must want a nutrient from it. And I'm always like, what nutrient does my body want from Fruity Pebbles? Because I crave those every single day. I don't. And graham crackers. Tell me I'm lying. Like,
you're not. That's why I'm laughing so hard. Oh my gosh.
So anyways, but bringing it back.
Yeah, bringing it back. Like, say the question again. Sorry.
What if your kids don't want to be vegan? Do they have a choice?
So again, this is where the lifestyle you're choosing based on your education, your ethics, your moral, whatever it's based on, the lifestyle you're choosing. And that's where you have to have this conversation either with your kids or with them. This is the lifestyle we're choosing. And then when they launch and are on their own and making their own choices, they can choose something else. They can choose a different lifestyle. One of my friends, the way she did it, she talked to her family and said, I'm only going to cook vegan and we're going to be vegan in the house. When we go out to eat or you're at somebody else's house or we're at a gathering or whatever, you can choose to eat whatever you want to eat. And then her kids would order meat dishes or eat whatever they wanted at whatever gatherings and stuff. And so that's another way that you can choose to do it. Like, well, we eat vegan in the house and then outside of the house, they can make their own choices. And so that gives your kids some autonomy. For us, that's not what we're doing, but we've also had lots of conversations around why we're vegan, why we choose this, and recognizing that we don't need those products.
Right.
And our kids understand that. So they want to live this lifestyle.
Yeah. And me personally, if I had a young person in the home that I was raising that was really pushing back, like, I don't want to be vegan, blah, 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 I would probably do some version of that. But I would say if we eat out and I'm buying, you're getting vegan. If you want to go get a job and buy your own food and pay for your own meal when we eat out, you order whatever you want because that's you.
Right. Because we view our dollars as votes.
Right. So I'm not going to pay for that out of my money. I'm not
spending my dollars on your votes. That because that's how we sort of see it. So I totally hear you on that as well.
Exactly. Yeah, there's lots of different ways you can go about that, like you were saying, as far as like, do they have a choice? What choice do they have? Type of thing. And as your kids get older, as they become teenagers, there's that independence that they are going to make their own choices. If they're on a school trip, we used to, since I was in middle school, we would go travel for wrestling and football. And there was a lot of eating out that happened there. So I could have, if my parents were doing some dietary restrictions or, I could have made my own choices once we hit the buffet line out there, since 7th grade. So just navigating it the best way you can. But answering these questions, along the lines of, it's just a boundary that we're setting like any other boundary you would set as parents.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
All right. So another question that we get a lot is something along the lines of, what about their health? Are you sure your kids are going to be healthy?
Yes.
Done. All right, next.
I'm sorry. I feel like such a snarky witch, man. Okay. Well, I can confidently say yes because we've done plenty of research and educating ourselves and lots of reading. Like, we know what they need and we know where to find it on a plant-based diet, and we make it a point to get it. So I can confidently say yes because blah, 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
I am not worried because blah, 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 blah.
That's perfect. Yeah. Yeah, that's what, something along the lines of, I've done lots of reading and research, and I'm making the best decisions I can based on what I've learned.
Mm-hmm. And if you're just starting out, you'd be like, I am learning a whole lot of new things that counters what I thought was true. And I am learning all the places that I can, make sure they get what they need.
Mm-hmm.
I'm learning that. And that's okay, because parenting is literally learning. You've never done this before.
You're literally just learning on the fly.
Yes. Like, that's the thing. And so it's like, if you haven't done all the research, like, you don't have to have all the research done to like make this lifestyle change. But if you do have kids, we do encourage you to be intentional about knowing what they need in their different stages and finding that in plant-based form, because they can, every stage can be met.
Yeah, exactly. And this is another area where, like we talked about before, it's never put under a microscope until it's veganism, because parents could take their kids to McDonald's every single day. And kids are literally surviving on chicken nuggets and cheese cubes and sugary cereal and, quote unquote, no one bats an eye.
Right.
But then you go vegan and all of a sudden it's like, are you sure they're going to be healthy? Like, you know what I mean? People aren't scrutinizing the McDonald's parents
the way in which they scrutinize vegan parents. Right.
So just, sharing that. And then, so a lot of times I'll also throw out there, like, if you're interested in learning more about what I'm basing my decisions on, I'd be happy to share that with you.
Yes.
Or send you some resources or loan you a book or whatever the case may be.
Yep.
And I also wanted to just throw out a little, like, we've been using the word education in here, like, based on my education. And I'm not, like, specifically referring to traditional education, or I'm not saying
like
because
setting.
I have these degrees or whatever. It's like my education is like how many books I've read, what I've done on my own to learn and that type of thing. Right?
Yeah. Books and videos and papers.
Yeah. Could be a degree. If you have a PhD in nutrition, then base your decision on that education.
Yes, exactly.
But if you just have read a lot of books and done that thing, then that's, that's the education you're basing it on. But I just wanted to make a note about what education means.
Yeah. When
and that this isn't limited to people with fancy degrees.
Right.
Right.
We're meaning lots of reading, lots of research, lots of reflecting. Do I understand? Because you have to reflect of, do I understand this?
Yes. Reflection is key. Discussion groups, productive discussions.
Yeah. Who can you ask if you don't understand it, or if you're not sure? Where can you go? Do I know where to find answers to things that I'm concerned about?
Right.
All of that
absolutely
involved in education and research.
For sure. Thanks. And then along the lines of health, we get this question a lot. Where does your kid get their protein, calcium?
Fill in the blank.
Fill in the blank. Where do they get that from? And sometimes I'm like, this is such a weird question, because why are you so worried about my kid's protein? Like, right? That it's one of those things, like, that's a weird thing to ask, but it's like normalized in our society.
Well, I
some
wonder
reason.
how much we're going, maybe not get it now because we've been vegan for long enough, but I wonder, as teen grows, a young boy who is athletic and active and wants to like be a professional dancer, how much more are we going to get questions around his diet and nutrition? Can he be strong enough to do the active things he wants to do as a teenage boy? And how are we providing adequate nutrition, quote unquote, for so I'm wondering if, like, I'm just thinking about, like, society's expectations of boys and men to be a certain way and do these things and whatever, and why it's so much based in protein, but really what they mean is meat. It's their strength and all that stuff is based in meat. And so it'll be interesting to see as he gets bigger and more active and really more serious about all that, how much more we get that question, because then that answers almost your question of, like, why are you so concerned about my kid's protein? They can be like, well, he's so active and he wants to be a professional dancer or a professional, you know, this active thing. He's going to need strong bones and muscle, and you need meat and dairy for strong bones and muscles.
Yeah, I wonder. And also with that, though, I wonder if it'll kind of chill out based on the way, you know, just like the media that's coming out and the way this conversation is being had nationally and globally about vegan athletes.
Yes.
You know,
they're becoming more mainstream.
Right.
People are understanding more that you don't need to be based in meat and dairy to be a strong athlete or a professional athlete or professional.
Right. Because when they say, like, where are they getting, where does he get his protein? You know, we could be like, where does the Tennessee Titans defense get their protein?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, are you sure he could be strong enough? Are you sure Tom Brady is strong enough? Like, he eats a plant-based diet. You know, you can use that as just some further evidence.
Right. Yeah. And you can answer the question directly.
Of course.
Of course you can answer the question
directly.
Let's not
throw that out there.
Like, you know, tofu, beans, greens, tempeh, faux meats, like.
Or what I would just say, he eats enough calories and a varied diet, and every single plant has protein in it.
Yes,
so it all adds up to an adequate intake.
Yeah, because the only time protein deficiency shows up is in malnutrition, when you're not getting enough calories. And
from, like, quality enough foods.
Right.
Because if you ate enough calories of Skittles, you wouldn't get enough protein.
Right.
I don't know why I always say Skittles. That's like my thing. That's always my, like, whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, because I'm always wary of listing foods when you talk about protein sources, because we've grown up with this idea that meat is the only place that protein exists. We need to normalize people understanding that protein exists in every plant food on the planet in different amounts, of course. But, you know, and then when you list foods, then it's like maybe people expand a little bit, but now they think, okay, protein only shows up in meat and tofu and beans and nowhere else. And so your kid has to eat tofu and beans every single day. And so, just giving that answer, like, he eats enough calories and a varied diet, and there's protein in everything, in every plant food. And so
he gets enough protein.
When he gets enough calories, he gets enough protein by default.
Yeah.
Done.
Yeah. I like that one much better.
Thanks.
So, but if you do need to list foods, there's a few. The other one that surprises me is broccoli. Yeah. The amount of protein in broccoli, is a
calorie
surprise.
For calorie.
Yes, it was. I was very surprised.
Broccoli packs a punch. Right.
That should be on a shirt. Broccoli packs a punch. Yes. Okay. Anyway, sorry.
And then, you know, the classic: don't kids need milk for strong bones? This was actually a concern that some people had with Constantine because he hated dairy. Yeah. And then with Fortune because he was vegan at such a young age. Yeah. People really get scared because the powers that be have convinced us that we need cow's milk.
For calcium.
Especially for children. So it's like infants should be breastfed or fed formula. And then the day they turn 1 year old, they need whole cow milk, and that's like the liquid gold that's going to set them up for success. Yeah. And that's been ingrained in everyone's brains. And so when you're not doing dairy at a very young age.
Yeah, I think we're going on like 70 years that's been ingrained.
Yeah. So when you stop doing dairy at a young age, people get concerned.
Yeah. Yes.
Right?
Yeah, they do.
And then you get the question, but don't kids need milk for strong bones? Or aren't you at least feeding them milk or some version of that? So you can just very simply answer this question with.
I don't know what you're looking for because I got a couple of things. I've got that actually calcium is found in many different plant foods. A really great source is leafy greens. And so get plenty of leafy greens. There's also calcium in fortified milks. And the countries with the highest rates of osteoporosis have the highest rates of dairy milk consumption. And people aren't talking about that. The countries with the lowest dairy consumption have the lowest rates of osteoporosis. So if milk consumption was an indicator of strong bones, shouldn't we have the lowest rates of osteoporosis based on milk consumption?
Drop that knowledge.
And we don't. It's inversely correlated. So you need to flip the switch.
That was really good. Okay. I'm convinced. No, I love that you throw that out there because sometimes I don't know why I forget about that, and then you articulate it so well.
Oh, because it's stuck with me.
I remember
because women. I think they push milk even harder for women and kids.
They do
because women have higher rates. I think it's with our
the bone density,
and menstruation, and something I don't know, hormones or something in women. But it's just eat your greens.
So it's funny because I remember the first time I ever heard that information. I'll never forget it because it was during my undergrad, and I had just taken this nutrition class and learned all about the glorious things of dairy because my textbook was written by the USDA, of course. So then we went to this birthday party and we're having a good time and kind of hit it off with this person that we had never met, and she was knowledgeable and she was just telling us all these wonderful things we had never heard before. And then somehow the topic of dairy came up, and we were vegetarian at the time. And then she said that. She talked about the correlation, in countries looking at, and because that's looking at large groups of people, populations, right? Studies comparing milk consumption and osteoporosis. And I had some serious cognitive dissonance going on. Like my brain did not want to hear what she was saying. So that's why I'll never forget. It stuck with me because I was really having a hard time digesting that and being like, all of a sudden it was like, does this lady really know what she's talking about? So if you're hearing this and you're like not vibing with it, I feel you on that. Stick with it. Do some reading. Seek out some resources. And if your friends hear this and they're like not vibing with it, be patient with them because that was me at one time. That was like, okay, all right. Anyways, then I started reading about it, started reading books about it and looking at data and all this stuff, and I was like, oh my God. Yeah. This is a thing.
It's powerful when you really start to learn about it and you see it. It's completely opposite of everything you've ever been taught your whole life.
Right.
It's so, Got Milk, the whole Got Milk campaign and all the celebrities and the milk mustache. And it's so...
Milk does the body good.
Yes, it's so ingrained, at least in U.S. culture. It's so ingrained.
Yeah. Yikes.
And I used to just drink milk with dinner, like meatloaf and mashed potatoes with corn, glass of milk. Sometimes spaghetti with garlic bread and a glass of milk. Like I had certain meals that just... The association for me was a glass of milk.
Yeah. And I remember in elementary school, they used to make us drink our milk. And it was well-intentioned adults that really genuinely thought that milk was going to do our bodies good. It was so important. And they would literally force us to drink it.
Yeah. And so to not go too much into it, but there's basically something in the milk that actually leaches the calcium out of our bones. And that's part of what is happening.
Right.
And so, but definitely keep reading on it because it was like, whoa.
So that was a really good answer to the question.
Oh, thanks.
And if you want to just give us something a little more simple, simply put, actually, no. At one point, we thought that, and that's been debunked.
Right.
That's been discredited.
Yeah.
Something along those lines.
Yeah.
Period.
And then where can they get their calcium? Fortified milks and foods and leafy greens are great great
yada,
options.
A lot of times it puts people at ease. Like if it's somebody I know well, or someone and love, and you just don't want to go deep, you don't want to get deep in the sauce with it. It brings some comfort if I just say that, while we use soy milk on a regular basis, which is fortified with everything that cow milk has.
Right. Yeah.
So they're getting their calcium, their vitamin D, their blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. And
it really puts them at ease.
And because there are people who are genuinely like, they love your kids and want good for them and just don't have the information.
Right.
So they're not coming for you. They're just really like, are you sure? Like,
yeah,
tell me, like, it's almost like they're asking you to tell me more. They're saying, tell me more without saying, tell me more.
Right. And it's coming
because
from a place of genuine concern.
Right.
Right. And so those are lots of some good different ways to answer that question.
Yeah.
And another thing I would say is, like, one of the most important things for strong bones is physical activity.
Yes.
Actually.
I think that ends up being more.
You can have
important.
all the calcium your body could ever want. And if you're not moving your body and getting physical activity, your bones don't have a chance to build themselves up. So the physical activity causes these little micro breaks in your bone, and then it rebuilds itself.
Yeah.
And that's where your strong bones come from.
And I was surprised at the number one recommended activity to build strong bones was simple, like walking. Because I was just like, Mama, go for a walk. Like, just walk.
Just walk.
That's all you need to do. Like, just walk, and it's going to help your body.
You don't have to do box jumps or...
You don't even have to run. Just walk.
Yeah, you don't got to do all these things.
You don't need hard cardio. You don't, like, weight training is helpful, but it's not even, like, bulky weight training or even, like, firming up weight training. It's just, like, resistance.
Like wall push-ups.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Very, very simple things.
For sure. All right. And then lastly, just a little bit about, because sometimes I hear this, is my kid's doctor said XYZ. Like,
and this one's so hard because doctors are held like on a pedestal in the US. We think they know everything. We think they've been taught everything. We think they stay up to date on everything. And the reality is they don't typically know nutrition.
Right.
And it's so unfortunate. And I think that's the way you answer it. Like, okay, there are other doctors who say differently, and it's important to recognize that most doctors get less than 4 hours of nutrition education in their entire medical career, and it's usually done in the undergrad. So how far out of undergrad school is your doctor is a question. So while their experience may benefit you, they're so far out from that nutrition education, and we know how quote unquote great, that's sarcasm, nutrition education is, because it's all based on USDA recommendations. It all comes from the federal government, which we know subsidizes the dairy and meat industry.
The dairy board, the meat board, they
all have a hand.
Have their hand in textbooks and literature and everything.
And so in that case, it might be good to just be like, look, not all doctors have nutrition training, so maybe talk to a dietitian, or look for a doctor who has experience in plant-based nutrition, or go to these websites and nutritionfacts.org. Look at Dr. Neil Barnard and whatever doctors,
Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine.
Yes, thank you.
You said that really well about the pedestal we put doctors on.
Yeah.
And we think they know everything about health. And actually what medical doctors know is how to diagnose and how to treat with medicine.
Right.
And that medicine is not food. They know how to treat with drugs.
Pharmaceuticals.
With pharmaceuticals. There you go. That's what they know. And that's because that's what they're taught in school.
The training is like.
And so unless they have seeked out a separate degree in nutrition and dietetics, every medical doctor then is in the same, they're getting their nutrition information from the exact same place that the general population is.
Right.
So doctors, generally speaking, are probably not any more knowledgeable about nutrition than any average person you see walking down the street.
They are probably just as confused as everybody else.
They are. And that's why one of my favorite books, The Proteinaholic, was written by a medical doctor and he's explaining this, like he got his nutrition information from the same places we get it from.
Right.
Google searches, Men's Health magazine, like all these random places that may or may not be credible, that may or may not have the truth, that are trying to sell
a product
that are
or
trying
something.
to have clicks and, you know, headlines that get attention, all these things. So it's really important to consider that and remember that.
Right.
And that's why, you know, this is a whole nother topic, but with medicine and wellness and all of that, it's good to have a multidisciplinary team.
Yes.
Don't go to your medical doctor for every single thing. Like you don't want to do that, right? For in school, you don't go to one professor for every single subject.
Right.
So go to your medical doctor when you need diagnosis, when you need pharmaceuticals, when you need medicine, stuff like that. When you need nutrition advice, go to your dietitian. Go to a nutritionist with a background that you trust.
Right.
That's valuable. When you need fitness advice, go to a fitness professional.
Yeah.
And don't go to your fitness professional for nutrition advice, and don't go to your dietitian for fitness. Like,
right.
maybe there's some overlap, but think about that, right? And put it in the bigger picture here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So yeah, whenever I hear, you know, well, my doctor said, it's always like a touchy thing that's hard to.
Yeah, and like second opinions are okay. Unless your child has a very specific condition. Do you know what I mean? That requires a treatment or a course of action or, but if we're talking like just a general physical, a general checkup, or like your kid went in for a cold and it comes up somehow, or because that happens, you know, like if it's just my doctor said blah, 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 and your kid is generally healthy, generally quote unquote normal, typical, whatever word you want to use, seek out specific information from like a nutritionist or a dietitian.
Yeah.
You
and
know?
This is where I think that dietitians, registered dietitian,
yes,
as opposed to nutritionists, because dietitians can work with your doctor. They can look at your medical chart. They can look at your health history. They can look at what medications you're on, what surgeries you've had.
Right.
They can really get in the nitty gritty of all of that and then make recommendations based on that.
Yeah.
So it's not like general recommendations.
That's a great distinction.
So if your child has this very specific condition, or you do, or whoever, if you can work with a dietitian that can review your whole medical history, they can still tell you. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
For example, my doctor said I have to eat this certain way because of this surgery that I had. Share that information with a dietitian and see what they say.
Right.
Because maybe the doctor just got their information from some generic fact sheet on WebMD that maybe wasn't even researched well.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And your dietitian can
or they're basing it off of like these people who have this typically have this surgery because of this, and it's some deficiency or something, but you're having that surgery for something else, and so that like eating certain way doesn't apply to you because you don't have that same condition. Exactly. There's just so much variation. I just want to get at that, the pedestal. We think they know everything, and they don't. They're human. They're only going to be able to retain so much. And you go to a specialist for, you're a GI specialist or a brain specialist or
ear, nose, and throat.
Right, exactly.
Podiatry, but yeah.
Think of a dietitian as another kind of specialist in the medical field, and seek them out if you need more guidance. Yeah. Cut and chop that one up.
That one got in depth real fast.
Yeah, because I just don't want to get down this rabbit hole of like, don't trust your doctor. Like, we're not saying that at all. Just recognize like the information they gave you, was it even necessary and pertinent to what you were being seen for? Because I've gone in for some things where I suddenly leave with information that I didn't ask for and isn't pertinent to what I was being seen for.
I think a lot of people can relate to that.
And so in that context as well, do you know what I mean? Like my doctor said is such a it's loaded with so many layers.
It's loaded, yeah.
It's loaded. So tread lightly and encourage people to seek other medical information, because general nutrition wise, they don't get enough education in it.
Right.
And they're not required to maintain any nutrition education.
Right. All right. So like we said, this is not an exhaustive list by any means.
No.
We just covered some of the more common questions we get.
If you get other questions, leave a comment, send them to us, email them or something, and maybe we'll do a part 2.
Yeah, we can really, I'm sure there's so many more that we could do more parts to this, but these are some of the common ones that we've seen. So hopefully this was helpful and gave you lots of information and ways to answer those questions.
Some sound bites, maybe.
Right. Ways to be diplomatic, respectful, compassionate when you otherwise might want to not be that.
Yeah.
All right. As always, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us. We release new episodes every 2 weeks. You can always email us at plantbased@apnm.org or visit our website at apnm.org/plant-based for classes, recipes, and more resources.
See you in 2 weeks.